everyone, Stan Dane here. After all the Warren Commission testimony, one might think there would be nothing left to say. But believe it or not, on the day before the Warren Commission report was to be presented to President Johnson, there was still something left for Roy Truly and Marion Baker to do. September 24, 1964 was the day that the final Warren Commission report was to be presented to President Johnson. But on September 23rd, Truly and Baker were asked to go back on the record to clarify an important point. Was Oswald on his own in the second floor lunchroom when they saw him just after the assassination? There had been press reports, based in large part upon statements made by Jesse Curry communicating with the press on November 23rd, that Oswald was with others in the room when the officer came in. The commission didn't want to fuel any messy conspiracy theories over loose ends, so they had Truly and Baker give voluntary statements. Here's Roy Truly's. I, Roy S. Truly, do hereby furnish this voluntary statement to Richard J. Burnett, who has identified himself to me to be a special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I am the superintendent of the Texas School Book Depository located at 411 Elm Street, Dallas, Texas, and was so employed as of November 22, 1963. On the above date, and just as President Kennedy's motorcade passed in front of my building, I re-entered the building with a Dallas police officer after some shots had been heard coming from the general vicinity. The officer and I proceeded to the stairways located in the northwest corner of the Texas School Book Depository building in order to proceed to the upper part of the building to see if we could see who had fired the shots. I was leading the way up the stairs and the police officer was following me. After I was starting to ascend the stairs toward the third floor from the second floor, I noticed that the police officer was talking to someone in the lunchroom located on the second floor. I then went to the lunchroom where I saw the officer facing Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald was by himself in the lunchroom. There was no one else in the vicinity of the lunchroom on the second floor other than Oswald, the police officer, and myself. I identified Oswald to the police officer as an employee of the Texas School Book Depository. I have read this statement consisting of this page and one other page, and it is true and correct to the best of my recollection. Roy S. Truly. Witnesses: Richard J. Burnett, William H. Shelley. Truly says no one else was in the lunchroom other than Oswald, himself, and the police officer. Everything else is pretty much consistent with his Warren Commission testimony. Either Truly dictated this statement to FBI Special Agent Richard J. Burnett, or it was prepared for him and he signed it as being true. Same with Baker here. I, Marion L. Baker, do hereby furnish this voluntary signed statement to Richard J. Burnett, who has identified himself to me as a special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I am employed as an officer with the Dallas Police Department and was so employed as of November 22, 1963. On the early afternoon of that day, after hearing what sounded like to me to be bullet shots, I entered the Texas School Book Depository building on the northwest corner of Elm and Houston Streets in downtown Dallas. I had entered the building in an effort to determine if the shots might have come from this building. On the second floor where the lunchroom is located, I saw a man standing in the lunchroom. He was alone in the lunchroom at this time. I saw no one else in the vicinity of the lunchroom at this time. M. L. Baker. I have read this statement consisting of this page and one other page, and it is true and correct to the best of my knowledge. I have initialed each page and each correction. Marion L. Baker. Witnesses: Richard J. Burnett, Bobby W. Hargis. Like Truly, Baker says no one else was in the lunchroom other than Oswald. But Baker's statement doesn't look like his Warren Commission testimony. Notice there are some curious corrections in Baker's statement. Let's ignore them for now, why they may be there and what they may suggest. Focus instead on this. Baker doesn't mention catching a glimpse of him, something he did at least 12 different times in his Warren Commission testimony. In fact, Baker doesn't even mention Oswald by name. No, Baker just sees a man standing in the lunchroom. Pretty much what he said to the FBI back on November 29, 1963, minus the lunchroom detail. And this was a week after his first affidavit, where he said, as we reached the third or fourth floor, I saw a man walking away from the stairway. When I was a boy growing up in rural Michigan, a man my dad worked with gave us a black sheepdog he could no longer keep. His name was Samson. He was about 6 years old and fit in right away with our family. A few months after we got him, Samson got loose and escaped from our yard. We searched all over, but we couldn't find him that day. The next day, the man that gave us the dog called to let us know that Samson was sitting on his front porch. He lived about 5 miles away. We picked him up, got him, never had any problems after that. About 2 or 3 years later, we found Samson missing one morning. I searched all over the local area that we lived. I couldn't find him. My dad came home. I got in the car with him. We drove around through the countryside looking for him. Pretty bummed out because we couldn't find him anywhere. Then my dad got a hunch. He turned the car and we headed over to where the original owner lived. And what do you know? There's Samson sitting on the front porch. We realized, even though he was completely familiar with our family, totally familiar with us and comfortable with us, Samson was never able to shake the knowledge of where his first home was. We have just seen where Marion Baker and Roy Truly were brought back to clarify some things for the Warren Commission. In March 1964, Baker had testified at length about catching a glimpse of a man through the window of a door leading to the second floor lunchroom. Now, 6 months later, his handwritten statement looked different. Why? Through this series, we've pointed out a lot of evidence for first floor to second floor evolution over the days and weeks following the assassination, with Roy Truly leading the charge as he floated a succession of stories to beta test what the official story would ultimately be. It must have been difficult for Baker to internalize all the changes. Maybe Baker was never very cool for the reasons for the changes to claim Oswald was somewhere he knew he wasn't. We can be sure Baker was thoroughly coached on the game plan prior to his Warren Commission testimony, his appearance. But after 6 months, his original memory and the things he said in his November 1963 statements kicked in and overshadowed his well-rehearsed Warren Commission testimony. I believe, like Samson the sheepdog, Marion Baker ran back to his first porch. He reverted back to what he first knew. In the next video, we'll wrap up this series with some concluding thoughts. Until then, this is Stan Dane, and as always, keep on rocking.